Thank you everybody who voted in the polls, and for almost voting me as one of the votes. That was super cool. I felt like I was like half flattered. I was almost flattered. No, but I'm really glad you guys are here, because I do feel like I'm one of the best, so no. I'm just being weird. Alright, so, not really, I'm actually very self-deprecating. Alright, so, it's a story, it's like 14 pages, but I'm obviously not going to read the whole thing, because that would take a really long time. So, there's like, I'll skip a couple of parts, I'll just explain what happened in the meantime, and you know, we'll just pick it back up, and if anyone gets lost, just, you know, surf the web, I don't know, whatever. Right. This is called Roller Coaster. I've never read this before, and it's not been published yet, so. When I was 10, a catalog arrived in the mail. The first thing I remember receiving outside of dull blue birthday cards from distant family members. It was called 100 Projects for Boys aged 8 to 13. I read it cover to cover, flipping each page with trembling, mosquito-bitten fingers. All the boys in the neighborhood who had gotten the catalog got together at the Center Park, a green space with a slide and a sandbox near the middle of our neighborhood. We discussed the various projects and decided that this was the right summer to build ourselves a roller coaster. One boy, Simon Bitters, who wore thick glasses and had a birthmark on his cheek, said that we could never build a roller coaster because we could never agree on whose yard to build it in and would fight over who would get to use it first. He thought we should all save up to buy go-karts and mini-bikes instead. He argued that those, at least, could be kept at our own houses and used at our own discretion. He proposed that we form a neighborhood-wide kart club. No one liked Simon Bitters, and we laughed away his doubts. We took a vote right then and there to build the thing in Jakey Florent's backyard, which sure irked Simon. Everyone liked Jakey just about exactly as much as they didn't like Simon. Jakey's mom and dad let him have a pellet gun with which he could coolly shoot down a robin on a phone line half a block away. Jakey's dad bought him a tall, round swimming pool, and his mom served us big tumblers of Kool-Aid and grilled ballparks whenever we'd come to swim. Simon couldn't swim because he had tubes in his ears, and he was sensitive to the sun. Guys, he would always say when we decided to go swim, the sun could literally kill me. Shut up, Simon. Then we would each give him a shove as we ran to get our swimsuits. When he got on his bike and pedaled away from the meeting in the park, we could see that his face was red. We could hear him mumbling under his breath like he always did. Simon was always complaining about something. We were all just about sick of it. Anyway, his folks always talked to each other in Dutch, and his house smelled like boiled cabbage even when his mom wasn't cooking it. Just to be a sport and show everyone how much he liked the idea, Jakey sent away for the plan book for the roller coaster that very afternoon, at his own expense. He swore to us that our roller coaster would be better than anything they had ever had at the old fairground. We had an impromptu round of applause for Jakey. It was a big day for all of us. The next part is them working a lot, mowing lawns and shoveling snow to save up money for parts. And then eventually they do, and then now they're about to start building it. Okay. It was just like a bunch of snow shovel, whatever. The morning construction was supposed to start. Many of us drank our first brown tastes of coffee, watching sunlight peek through shades into breakfast nooks and dining rooms. We had long days ahead of us, sure, but in the thin morning light, each day seemed as though it would slip by painlessly. Each of us boys turned up to Jakey's house with tools borrowed from our fathers, 2 big tool belts cinched around the extremes of our waists. In the backyard beyond the fence, Jakey was dressed in steel-toed boots and a yellow hard hat, bearing the name of his father's contracting company, Red E Contractors. The E was large and indeed was red. Across the grass were surveying stakes bow-tied with red ribbons denoting where the coaster would stand, and as we gathered near the back porch picnic tables, Jakey's dad stood up in motion for all in attendance to be quiet. We boys hushed up, and after a moment, Jakey's dad's friends quieted down too. His dad took a big drink from his beer, then wiped his mouth and belched. We all giggled at that. On this ostentatious day of my boy Jakey, his first erection, his first construction job, I just want to say something he said, taking another drink from his beer. God damn it, boy, I am just so proud of you. And he took another drink and spilled a little beer on his button-down shirt. You kids are gonna bid one hell of a fucking roller thingy. He coughed. Jakey, he said a little louder. I'm fucking proud of you, Jakey, my little fucking man, my boy. Jakey's mom pressed on his dad's shoulder and said something quietly into his ear, but he shrugged out from under her hand. No, he whispered through his teeth, a loud whisper we could all hear. I'm just trying to tell Jakey how goddamn proud of him I am. God damn it, so just hold the fuck on. Jakey's mom turned pretty red, and she turned and walked straight inside, curling the huge sliding glass door open as she passed. She closed it kind of hard behind her. Jakey's dad belched again, although this time it wasn't as funny. And then he mumbled something about us getting to work, which we all agreed was probably a good thing to do at this point. Then they built a roller coaster. And the important part about learning to build a roller coaster is that they're actually learning like essential skills in construction, which is, you know, like important. So, you have to imagine there's lots of passages about like support beams and learning the different types of screws. Okay, finally, just in time for July 4th, we were ready to lay in the last section of the track, one of the swoops at the bottom of the first hill. Some of us arrived early to help pry the wooden rails into place and to plane the connection by hand, smoothing the transition. And all at once, the big boom was completed. That's the name of the roller coaster. Our roller coaster was complete. It was done, and before the 4th. Jakey told us to wait just 1 second and disappeared into the door on the side of the garage. A moment later, he came out holding a moist brown bottle of beer straight from his dad's fridge. He walked straight up to the section of rail we had just put in, held the bottle up above his head. When he smashed it against the wood, beer and glass trickled down to the grass beneath, glinting in the sunlight. He turned around smiling. It was official. It was our roller coaster. We stepped back and finally took the whole thing in, no longer wary of seeing a rough collection of planks and nails, screws, and various cuts of sheet metal. We wanted to take in this whole massive thing we had created, and so we stared fully at it, breathing slow breaths. That's it? Someone at the back of the group said it. We never found out who. True, it was smaller than what some of us with bigger imaginations might have thought it would be, might have dreamed about. Many of us, though, knew in our hearts just how exciting it would be to ride it, whatever its size. Well, who's going to test it? Asked Jakey, arms on his waist, his construction helmet slightly askew. No one spoke up. The big boom might not have been huge, but it was still a roller coaster after all, and not to be trifled with. Come on, pussies, someone has to test it, said Jakey. Tapped his foot. Finally, he jabbed his finger at someone. That someone was Simon, who shook his head violently from side to side, trying to scoot to the back of the crowd. Jakey anticipated this move and started chanting, Simon, 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 Simon. Some of the rest of us joined in too. Someone shoved Simon toward the coaster, and he looked back at us as if to plead for sympathy. We just kept chanting. So Simon, bravely as he could, stepped forward to the ladder and climbed into the car. We belted him in with the old seatbelt Jakey's dad had picked up at Rinker's junkyard. We checked that the bolts holding the seat down were tight, that the nails in the fiberboard exterior of the car were pounded all the way in, and we found only a few that were bent over. Everything looked as good as it was going to get. And then it was time. Jakey started the countdown. We shoved the car forward and lashed it to the chain, bumping heavily up the hill, rocking forward and backward, Simon jolting along with the shocks, ascending. When it reached the halfway point, Simon turned his head to look to the side, not toward us, but toward what must have been the horizon, the distance, checking the height of the ascent. Turning forward again, he clutched at the sides of the car with his hands, fingers going red, then whitening with the force of his grip. As the car reached the end of the chain, deposited at the crest of the hill, Simon's eyes went wide. He sat perfectly still as the car clunked once more, crept the few inches forward to the drop-off, then slipped silently forward, downward. The car pushed toward the crook of the hill, gaining speed, and as it did, gaining sound, the sound of 1,000 roller skates thrashing the sidewalk, the bump of a train crushing trestles into the gravel, a whoosh of speed just at the edge of our hearing. Simon, weightless, windswept, shrieked a hell scream until his yowl was cut off by the sharp ascent of the first pump of track. In that instant, Simon's eyes glowed with what must have been astronaut pleasure, the shadow of the unknown world of anti-gravity. The car slipped up the hill like a feral animal, while red-faced Simon was pressed back into his seat, his eyes glued to the approaching hilltop. Upward, upward he rolled, metal wheels clanking, rail grinding, a spark or two spitting from beneath the car. The wood of the construction flexed weirdly in places, settling, extending, smacking back down. Simon, his blue t-shirt caught up in the speed of the ascent, pressed back against his skinny frame, held in his chest a deep breath, knuckling down onto the handholds. Simon rose, up, 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 and at the top of the track, the car soared free of the rail. Upward, upward, he continued on, loose from the bonds of the earth, his face a mask of serenity. He soared upward, rising above even the eaves of the house. The wheels of the car spun crazily, unrestrained by track or weight, whirring out the metallic hum. Simon and the car reached their apex, eye level with the chimney of Jakey's house, and hung there in the air. They passed in front of the sun, a blinding corona around the car, and Simon, and yet not one of us took our eyes from him. Then Simon and his chariot changed direction and plummeted to the grass. When the ambulance got there, Jakey was in his room, and we could hear his dad yelling in another part of the house. His mom was helping the ambulance crew however she could, phoning parents, making sure everyone was all right. We heard the paramedics say broken arm, wrist. We heard fractured coccyx. We didn't know what a coccyx was, but we knew what it sounded like when it broke. We knew it must have hurt like crazy. Simon had screamed like hell until the ambulance had got there, and we had all just stood and watched. So, we veterans of the roller coaster project went on to celebrate Independence Day with lead in our hearts, a fresh failure. For many of us, it was the first of what we assumed would be many disappointments. A life lived from screw-up to screw-up seemed dingy and gray, and yet we were resigned to it. It was our fate. Barbecues, ice chest cold sodas, and bright explosions in the sky did not lift our spirits. We heard that Jakey's parents were getting divorced. Some of us knew how that felt, though some of us didn't. Someone said that we should try to fix whatever had gone wrong with the coaster, and some of us agreed that we ought to, since it was our coaster after all. Some of us figured it was our right, considering all the hard work we had done, all the hours planning, saving, building. I didn't go, but the boys that did said that Jakey was just sitting in the broken car in the grass, and then he shot at them with his pellet gun when he told them they wanted to try to fix the coaster up. I spent the rest of the summer building a model airplane with a real combustion engine. It had a custom blue and green paint job and little ailerons and stabilizers that adjusted to wind levels. It had tiny inflated rubber tires, and it sputtered to miniature life when we primed the motor. I took it to the old fairground to try it out. The trees had turned wild around the clearing where the fair used to be. They had grown thick and shadowy. I launched it from where a few rusty metal bars from the Ferris wheel still lay, and it flew down, way down the green space, past the bumper car building, past the concession stand where the fire had started, over the tree line. It winged out over the forest, that awful forest, and off to where I could no longer see it. Thank you.